The leather seats in my old car are terrible, so today we're gonna repair them with this, I hope. What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda. In my hand here, I hold a box that I just received from leathertouchupdye.com. It's actually a Canadian company. I've been watching a lot of their videos. The leather in my car here is in terrible shape. These are the original seats. I don't know that anything was ever done to them to preserve them. They are looking really ratty. In fact, they've got some tears. They've got some major cracks. The color is gone. And when I was thinking about what to do with this car, I was thinking about some options here. And I was looking at these seats and I was like, oh man, they are so far gone. You know, like the diaphragm was torn and the seats here have major cracks, not just wear, but major cracks in the leather. And that is the same on the passenger side. The rear seats aren't as bad in terms of cracks in leather, but the seat is tearing. And so I thought, well, this is a no-brainer. I don't have any choice, but I'm going to have to get them reupholstered. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to get a different color. I'm going to go tobacco in here, something like that. And then I looked, and there was a company, lseat.com, and they made the leather seat covers for this. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll get those and put them in. But the more I thought about it, this car is not worth a lot of money, and I don't want to spend a lot of money on it. And I thought, well, the cheapest thing I can do, the quickest thing I can do is try to restore these seats. And so I, like I said, watch videos on this company, and they seem to have an infomercial worthy product that just rejuvenates the seats, adds strength, gives it a solid color. The top coat gives it a matte finish. It looks fantastic. In fact, I could even do the center console lid there too, not just the seats. And so I thought, why not give them a try? So that's what we're going to do here. And I may ruin these seats because I am definitely a moron, and they don't say that their products are moron proof, but I'm hoping that these seats, which I will give you a very close look at, hopefully are salvageable. Hopefully we'll add some strength, but more importantly than that, they'll just look good. Like me, weak and good looking. So let's get started on cleaning these seats up, putting in some of that conditioner to do what we can to kind of make the leather material as supple and as strong as possible. And then we will use the leather repair kit that they include, which I think is some sort of polymer or something like that. You know, it kind of looks like Elmer's glue to me. We will fill in some of these cracks, and once that's dry, then we will put in the dye and then the top coat, and hopefully these seats will be transformed or at least saved. So let's take a look at the seats first and then get them cleaned up. All right, I've got my auxiliary light here to show you what these seats look like. I mean, in between the cracks, I can see the thread and it's brown. I mean, I don't know that it was nylon, so it is starting to tear away. These seats aren't perforated, but they have a little bit of texture, but you can just see, look at the cracking on these. I mean, you can see right through it. It looks like the leather is dried and cracking. The seats down here are torn. Obviously, I went ahead and sewed that, but man, take a look at this. This is just really, really bad. And I'm not sure that any of that can be, you know, salvaged, but we are going to try. The bolster here is terrible. If we look over on the passenger side, it's kind of the same thing, cracks all over. Even though I don't think people are riding in this side as much, it's just age has taken its toll. Not on me though. I'm timeless. Kind of like Dick Clark. Isn't he dead? And then kind of in the back seat here, same deal. If you look around, we just have lots of cracks. The discoloration is really bad. One of the things that I like is that because they're not perforated, because those little dots there are just kind of pressed into the leather, kind of stamped in, and they're not perforated going all the way through. I think that's going to help because I don't have to worry about poking little holes in there if I use leather repair, and hopefully that just gives me more surface area and no little perforations that might tear or anything. So this is what it looks like now. Not particularly attractive, really tough shape. So let's go ahead and get this cleaned up so that we can start getting to the sexy part about re-dyeing and repairing these. Even though I ordered the leather repair kit and the dye from leathertouchupdye.com, I believe that's what it is, I ordered the leather cleaner and preparer from Leather Hero. I actually also ordered some conditioner, kind of some restorer as well, because I thought that that would help the leather underneath, you know, kind of give the leather as much structure and attention as possible before we put the dye on. I was kind of worried that once you put the dye on, you might have this kind of brittle, dried out leather underneath it that still might kind of fall apart or crack. And so I thought we would do some work here to clean up the leather, take off as much of that top layer of the leather as possible to get to the leather, to try to do what we can to the leather before re-dyeing it. So just try to give these seats the best chance at lasting that we can. And this was a lot cheaper and easier to get. So this Leather Hero leather cleaner and preparer, it just is some sort of liquid. I'm actually going to use it with one of these leather brushes, I think a horsehair brush, and I'm just going to kind of liberally apply it, scrub it, and then wipe it down with a towel, and we will start with that. All right, so what it says is actually to add it into a spray bottle and then dilute it with water. I only added a little bit of water. I think it's 1 part solution and 1 part water, but I want this to be pretty aggressive here. So I'm just going to turn this on, and then we will go ahead and I'm just going to kind of spray it lightly on everything. And then I've got, like I said, a brand new horsehair brush here. So I am just going to go ahead and scrub this in. Trying to want to get everything out, from oils to dirt, and I don't know, I feel like I need a little more. I don't see any sudsing action, so I'll be a little more aggressive with this. And these seats are dirty, and I think once you get stuff coming up to the top, put a little bubbles here, just grab your microfiber and wipe it up, and hopefully you'll see stuff coming up into your cloth here. So I tell you what, I'm already getting a pretty matte sheen to everything, and stuff is definitely coming up on this cloth, so that is a good sign. I think when you have kind of this matte finish, that means any of the oils and stuff that is in the leather is starting to come up here. So let me just give this a pass up here, and I'm going to do this with the rest of the seats and be as aggressive with the cleaning as possible. I actually don't mind if I kind of strip this off. Depends on the type of car you have and how new it is, that you might want to be a little less aggressive with it. But in this case, hell, I'd take a piece of sandpaper to these seats if I knew it was going to help. All right, seats are cleaned. They are drying. They have a matte finish, but they still look terrible. And so I actually picked this up. It's a leather binder, and it's from another company, and this is by Furniture Clinic. I checked out a bunch of their videos. They seem to do a lot of really good stuff too. But this stuff is kind of like a conditioner used to strengthen heavily worn and cracked leather. Now, I don't expect this to give me the finish that I want, but like I said, if this can soak through this top layer of paint or finish that's on the leather and kind of rejuvenate the leather underneath, that would give me a lot more peace of mind that when I put the dye on top of it, and that provides its own strength, that the seats will be as strong as humanly possible. So this leather binder, I don't know, it kind of looks like milk in there. They say to apply this by putting on thin coats with a sponge, especially on the cracked areas, and you might do 2 or 3 coats. It also says you might want to sand it with like 1200 grit sandpaper, so the stuff might kind of build up actually with time too. But what I'm really going to do here is I'm going to be pretty generous with this. I'm going to be pretty liberal with this on the sponge applicator, and then kind of wipe it in, kind of pushing it in to try to get it to permeate as much of the leather as humanly possible. Hopefully kind of inflate that leather one more time, and then we will do definitely a few coats of this, kind of letting it dry in between before we get to the dye. So let's start on this. All right, so here we have the cleaned seat, and I have one of these little detailing sponges. I'm just going to pour some of the binder out. It's not quite as runny as milk. It's kind of like melted milkshake. And I'm going to be, like I said, pretty generous with this. I'm actually not too worried about getting it everywhere, but I just want this leather to be as healthy and as durable and as pliable as humanly possible. So just getting it everywhere here, man. All right, I don't know if this leather is super dry, but even though I had a ton there, it is just getting soaked up in there, and my sponge is actually going dry very, very quickly. So it's a good sign, I guess, that this is going into the leather, and really, there's not much material on top after 40 plus years of just sitting around. So I'm going to do this and put on this top coat on all the seats. Going to let that dry and then come back and do probably 3 in total. So that is what the game plan is. We'll be back. All right, and top tip for you, wear your nitrile gloves when you're applying this stuff, because while I felt like a lotion, it feels more like Elmer's glue by the time you're done. So after I finished that coating, it just felt sticky and hard and kind of rubbery. Now, the good news is that stuff is taking my hand leather and making it feel like heavy-duty work gloves. So hopefully that is good news for what it is doing to the leather in the car. But the next coats here are going to be with the use of nitrile gloves. No one said I'm smart. No one, ever. No one. Period. All right, let's get to coat number 2 and 3, and then we'll see what it looks like. All right, so it's been a while since I applied the leather binder, and I want to give you my thoughts on it. First of all, what you can see here is that it has soaked in. I mean, I had layered this binder on top of here, and it is gone. I can't see anything, or it dries clear. Now, as I mentioned, when I got it on my hands, it kind of felt a little sticky, almost like a pliable Elmer's glue. I mean, not that sticky or that tough, but what I realized is that if you are putting this in here, and because it was kind of milky, I mean like a thick milk or something, a buttermilk, and if it soaks in there, because it is kind of rubbery, like some sort of elastomer or something, and soaks into the leather and then dries, it really is going to add kind of some body and structure to the leather. It almost kind of reminds me of what you would do with carbon fiber. So you take carbon fiber and then you put the resin into it, and then when it dries, it kind of gives it shape and structure and holds it in its shape. And so this is kind of like a resin for leather. Now, I will actually say that the worse this top coat is on your leather, the better it will probably soak in. So if you really took kind of like a Brillo pad and scuffed up the leather, kind of got rid of like all this paint that's on the top coat, put this on so it soaks into the leather, I mean, I think that's actually going to be even better. But as it is right now, I mean, this is actually pretty good. It just actually feels like better. And I haven't really done much else. So what I'm going to do here is now I am going to go ahead and just kind of clean the leather a little bit here, make sure anything that is still on top or something that didn't cure or dust or dirt since I did the binder on this, and just make sure that there's nothing on top of it. And then we are going to get out that leather touch-up dye leather repair and start going after some of the cracks. Now, I will say on here, some of the cracks actually kind of look like they are filled. Let me show you the front. And here is the front seat, and these were the worst, but as you can see, the cracks aren't as light anymore. They definitely have kind of been impregnated with that binder, and so I wouldn't call them good by any means, but they are better than they were. If you weren't going to do anything beyond this, I think that would help. But you can still see these cracks here, so I'm going to get out the leather repair and start filling in the stuff, because we've got to let that sit dry and cure too. All right, seats are prepped. So now we are going to get into the repair portion before we get into the dyeing. I want to show you what I got here from leathertouchupdye.com. It's a long URL. So here is the dyeing kit here, and this is the large kit, but we're not getting there yet. This is the part that I am going to bust out now, and this is the large 2-ounce filler kit. Large is 2 ounces, which isn't a lot to me, but I don't think you're going to need a lot of this stuff. Now, this is kind of like a putty, and I feel like it's going to be a flexible leather-like filler. I'm not sure if it's a polyester or polymer or something like that, but basically it kind of looks like Elmer's glue. Kind of works a little bit like a thick paste, and we are going to use this to fill the cracks, which I have many. So I'm going to show you this on some of the cracks here, on some of the big cracks, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the day and fill up all the little tiny cracks all over the place, and hopefully 2 ounces is enough. My leather is in not a very good condition. All right, so I'm here on the driver's seat, and you can see we have these cracks. Now, I don't have tears or holes per se, and that's where you would use that fabric backing. So if you had a puncture or a tear that went all the way through the leather, you would put that in the back, then use some of the filler to kind of use it as glue and fill it up. But luckily, I don't really have that. But I do have these, and if we just dye that, it is going to look kind of a mess. So here is the filler, and it kind of looks like mayonnaise. Mayonnaise! Lunch Ladyland. Yeah, it's kind of got that consistency. And basically what you want to do here is just kind of fill this. Now, I will say you can also sand this, so I guess it's not a problem if it's a little too high. And it's probably better to be a little too high and fill this in, although you don't want it to be so tall or high that it won't dry, but I am just kind of going along the crack. You don't want to kind of go against the crack, but perpendicular to it so that you're smoothing this out. And if I see a little leather piece sticking up there, so I'm just going to kind of spackle that in. I mean, I guess it's just like spackling leather. And even though this is my first experience with it, I say I'm going to get better with this pretty quickly. So that's all I'm going to do on that crack there. And then I'm going to use this to fill it in. And I guess what I've kind of noticed here is that less is more. So I will just kind of start the bead there and then kind of go like that. And seems like I'm getting most of it. It doesn't have to be perfect, especially if you're kind of struggling with it. I would do a first pass. I feel like 2 or 3 coats might be necessary on some of these really deep cracks, like right up here too. And kind of found that putting a little starter bead at the beginning and filling it in like that seems to be a pretty good little strategy. And actually, I have not used much filler yet, so I guess a large filler here is probably going to be enough to do the rest. But this is actually kind of a nasty crack because it's not just a crack where the 2 sides are even. It's a crack where this back side is a little higher. So I feel like it's going to do more filling here on this front edge, kind of like that. So anyway, also have gloves on because I would expect this to dry strong and kind of permanent, so you don't want to get it on your fingers. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and fill a bunch of these cracks. These seats will probably look a fright because I have so many cracks, and crack kills. But I'm going to keep finishing this up, and I will probably do a couple layers. I think that this needs at least an hour or 2 in between to cure. So I'm going to put this on, probably let it dry for a couple hours. It's pretty warm here in the garage. Come back, fill up wherever I need to, and then we will go on to the next part. All right, so it's been a while here, and man, you can see what I've done. I have splattered this everywhere because the seat was in really, really bad shape. Now, I do want to mention here that as this leather filler dries, I don't know, it's water-based. Maybe that water, as it leaves there, it kind of shrinks a little bit because even though I kind of filled these cracks up to the top, I can feel them again. So I think it shrinks a little bit as it cures and dries. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to go over these particular cracks. Some of the places that were just like creases and stuff, that feels pretty flat and level. But where I had these cracks, I'm going to go ahead and put another layer on top of there. You know, I might have to do this a couple more times. But then also what I'd like is actually include sandpaper in the kit. I might actually have to use some other sandpaper too. But then you can just knock it down. So I definitely like that. And to be honest, I am going to re-dye everything, so it's really not a problem. I'm not just going to do a spot re-dye. So I want to make sure that these cracks, which were the worst, you know, the leather was actually splitting there, are done. And then once that cures again overnight, then I'll kind of knock it all down, make sure it's nice and smooth, because once we start putting dye on it, just like paint on a car, it's going to show everything, right? Because paint doesn't really self-level. I don't think the dye will. It'll just show all the texture underneath it. So I'm going to get another layer on there, and then we will start putting down some color. And that's when it gets satisfying. All right, so it's actually the next day, so this has had plenty of time to dry. And actually, I was taking a look at it, and one of the things I was worried about is, oh my gosh, it's not dry yet. And what I realized is, yeah, it's dry, it's just pliable. And when things are pliable in my mind, my first thought is, oh, it's still wet. But what you can see here is it moves, and it kind of moves like leather. So I think that is obviously the point. Kind of didn't dawn on me. When you see something like this, I kind of expect it to be like hard, like speckle, and that wouldn't make any sense. Now, I can feel there are some ridges, you know, particularly right here where it didn't get feathered into the leather perfectly. You can see there's probably some touch up I could do there to get to some material in there too. But what I'm going to do here is maybe just touch it up a little bit, but I'm going to use the sandpaper they include, kind of smooth everything down anywhere you can feel a little tiny piece of grit or a little high spot or an area where it needs to get smoothed into the leather. I'm just going to knock that down. The sandpaper they only send is just one piece, so I have plenty of sandpaper because I have lots of filler all over the car, front and back. Now, I also want to say here that I only used maybe about half of the filler, maybe 60% of the filler, but these seats were in pretty bad shape. Like I said, filler all over the place. And in an old car like this, you can kind of expect that with some big cracks. Now, if you have a fairly new car and you're just trying to get rid of some of the bolster wear or creases or folds, then the 1 ounce filler is probably more than enough. I have plenty here to fix something else if I need to, but if you are kind of wondering, hey, how much filler do I need? It goes a long way. So you probably don't need to order as much as I did, but I did because I didn't want to order again. I just wanted to make sure that I could get through this and have enough to do everything that I wanted. The thing that I am worried about is, do I have enough dye? Because obviously I have to dye this filler, and that's going to need 2-3 coats to just get that to the dark color, as well as cover the whole seat covers, front and back. So there's a lot of real estate to cover. And because I used a lot of filler, I feel like I'm going to use a ton of dye. So there was part of me that wanted to order a second bottle of the 8-ounce dye, but it's like $100 a bottle. So wanted to be cheap about it. I figure I guess I can always order it if I need to, but we'll see how far it goes and how much of that dye this leather soaks in, drinks up with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start sanding this down, get that nice and smooth, use some leather cleaner to clean everything up, make sure I get all the particulate and dust up, and then we'll start dyeing. And in case you're wondering what they include here, it looks like they include a couple pieces of 220 grit sandpaper, so has a decent amount of texture to it. So we're gonna sand this down, just smooth all that out, and then move on to the next phase here. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on here. I'm just trying to knock down areas where I can feel any ridges or high spots and just make sure that we have nice smooth transitions into the leather. All right, I vacuumed everything up, and even though now I don't have the dust sitting on there, it's actually, I don't know, it's kind of promising. Normally something like this would have me freaked out, but man, I do like the fact that those big tears are gone. It gives me some peace of mind that the rest of the seat could look okay. But as you can tell here, that looks atrocious. So the next thing I'd have to do is go ahead and clean up this leather. I'm actually going to use Furniture Clinic leather cleaner because I want to give it a really deep clean. And I don't want a leather cleaner that also has like a conditioner in it that might put something greasy down, because I really want to make sure that the dye, when I apply it here, sticks to it. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe everything down with this leather cleaner, and then we will get onto the dye finally, and then see if this is as good as it's going to get, or if it's going to get better. I hope it gets better. All right, all cleaned up, that extra white dust all gone here. I'm just going to let this dry overnight because I am tired, and I also want to make sure that all the moisture is gone before we go ahead and put down some color. All right, good night. See you in the morning. All right, so it's finally go time, and I bought the Automotive dyeing kit here from Leather Touch-Up Dye. Comes with some gloves here, but I already put on some of my own gloves because I have to wear extra large, you know what I'm saying? I like them roomy. Listen, we have to also use these little sponge applicators. I bought some extras because of how much real estate I actually have to dye. I went ahead and shook up the dye. I ordered this in black. They actually had like a black, and then I think this was called ebony, and then one other, oh, so it says right there, ebony black on it. And then they also had another black that was a little more charcoal, but since these are black, I thought I would just go with the total black, and because I'm going to cover them anyway, I want them as dark as possible. I'm going to cover all the leather as opposed to kind of just match leather, so I didn't think it's that big of a problem. So I've gone ahead and shaken this up. So one of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to dab on the areas where I have filler, and then I'm going to kind of wipe all over the rest of the leather. Hopefully this will suck in and absorb as much of this as possible, because I think this is kind of like a reinforcer, not just a dye, not just color, but some sort of maybe latex or something in there too. So I'm going to do that, and then probably continue to do that, and maybe dab on the final coat to get the consistency the same everywhere, you know, kind of give it a little bit of a mottled look. But especially here where now it's really smooth because of the filler, I think I want to add a little texture, but then I want to get this all over. Again, this is only the 8-ounce bottle here, so I hope this is enough to do the whole thing, because I have done filling on all of the entire car here. So let's get on it. All right, I've shaken up the dye here. I'm gonna put some into the pad here. I'm gonna try to be pretty generous with this, and like I said, I'm gonna start dabbing it, especially right here where this was really big. Wow. All right, this is dark. It's actually covering the filler way quicker than I expected, which is a good thing, because then I don't know that you'll need to use as much dye, but I was kind of expecting to really see it poking through. I mean, I definitely can see white kind of where it kind of left low spots where I tapped it and the sponge went all the way to the leather, but that is way better on a first pass than I was ever expecting, which is actually awesome. Might be a little easier to see up here on the vertical bolster here, but I'm just gonna dab it on there. Man, I guess the darker the dye, the quicker other colors will go away, but look how fast that goes away. All right, so now what I wanna do is, just for speed of demonstration, I wanna kind of go ahead and rub this on the rest of the leather. A lot of this I did not do any work on, some of that I did, but because I think for speed and coverage, you are just going to wipe this on in most places, and then instead on the final pass, I'll probably do more dabbing, but a different kind of dabbing. You know what? I'll be honest. I was thinking that it might be really streaky when I wipe it on, but that doesn't look bad at all, actually. So again, I'm probably dabbing it on the spots with the filler just to make sure that the filler is fully hidden and that there's a decent amount of dye on top of those light spots. But once I get that gone, I may just do wiping with the dye. So anyway, I am just going to keep working on this, get one coat of black on everything, all the seats here, and then let that dry. I do have a heat gun. I'm not going to accelerate this unnaturally. It's pretty warm in my garage here. Honestly, just because of the condition of the leather, at least 2 more coats, or until I run out of dye, whatever comes first. All right, I'll keep working. All right, first coat of black is done. This is the seat I started with, and I feel like the dye is almost dry already. It's definitely a little wet in some areas that it pooled, but I'll tell you what, man, that first coat hid so much of that filler. I'm actually really impressed by it. You can still see it up here on the headrest, but that's just the first coat, and I'm really hoping to get 2 more coats because I feel like the dye itself is actually a fairly good bonding agent. Kind of will strengthen the leather as well. Kind of put a strengthening vinyl coat on the top here. You can still see it's a little wet there where I was dabbing it, kind of in the crevices of the seat. But first of all, that ebony is a pretty good match, and can't see any of the filler really. So let that dry, but yeah, same on this passenger seat. There were a lot of repairs on there, and that looks pretty good. You can't really see it. So man, I'm already pretty happy with the results, and we have just begun. But when you've got a lot of white rubberized filler on there, you can't help but feel a little bit insecure, but so far that is working a treat. All right, I'm gonna let that dry overnight and then put another coat on. All right, Curious Pandas, I have now 2 coats on here, and I put it on yesterday, so it's had plenty of time to dry. Actually, I took this car out for a drive because I wanted to check for color transfer, and one of the things that I want to say here is that I'm just super impressed. This doesn't even look like the same seat. Yes, there's some age, and where I sewed it, that's kind of deformed a little bit, but this side was just atrocious, and it's unbelievable what that looks like and how good it is. As I said, that first coat went on there really well, but a couple of my observations is that I can still see a little bit. It's not that easy to see. If we go on the back, it might be a little easier to see, but there are just some spots in the right light where you can kind of see the filler. Man, I'm having a tough time finding places, but just a little bit, just like a little discoloration where it doesn't quite look dark ebony black. It kind of looks maybe like a black blue. And it's just the most subtle things. Some of that might just be the way the filler isn't textured enough. I did model it and dab it, but sometimes it's a little smoother than some of the other places, so it might be a sheen issue. But I just want to say, this doesn't look like the same seat. The front seats, which were the worst, this one is the one that's incredible. And one of the things that I'm going to do here is do a 3rd coat because I have enough leftover dye, which is actually really awesome. So I can say that for 2 front seats and a back seat, that 8-ounce bottle seems to be enough. Even for these seats, which have a ton of surface area, lots of pores, it was super dried out, it seems to be enough. The other thing I will say is that there were some areas where there was thread visible between here, and because of the age of this car, that thread seemed to be almost like a cotton thread, not like a nylon that it would be now. And so what it seems to have done is dyed that thread and hopefully given it some more structure and strength as well. So that's really exciting. It was kind of a byproduct that I didn't really think about. The other thing I will say is I did drive around, sat in the front seat. I'm not getting any color transfer, and I have not even put the top coat on. So even as I was sitting around, driving around, getting warm, rubbing around, no color transfer onto my clothes or anything like that. So I think that will be even better once I get that top coat on. The other thing I will say is that the dye seems to dry pretty matte. Now, I ordered the matte finish top coat. You can actually order the satin, gives it a little bit more of a shine. You can look over here. If you look at the vinyl on the door panels here, it's kind of a little bit of a shininess. The vinyl on the back of the seat here, a little shiny, but up here on the headrest, you can see matte, shiny, matte, shiny, you know, kind of like the T-zone of your face. So what I love is that matte look, because that actually looks like newer leather to me. So I actually really like this. I'm hoping it retains that, but as you put this on, I don't know if every color that they have does the same thing, but you get this matte finish with the dye, and I really love that. I think it's amazing. It looks much more like a modern new leather to me. So all that being said, that's kind of my first take after putting on the bulk of the dye. Now I'm going to put on my third coat, let that dry, and then we will put on the matte finish top coat as well. I will also say that I was doing a little modeling. I was kind of patting the dye into the repaired spots to give it a little texture, but I got kind of tired of that. My hand was getting tired, and so basically what I've been doing here is just wiping the dye on, and so all of this is just me wiping the dye, not trying to create any extra texture. With that first pass of the dye, that's kind of where I tried to add texture to that repaired area, but I'm not even trying anymore. I'm just going for speed and coverage because there's so much real estate to cover with this. So super happy so far. Let's finish it up and then I'll give you my final thoughts. All right, so I think I have enough dye for one more final coat. I think maybe about a third of the bottle left there. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply it now, and then we'll do the top coat. All right, I can't believe I'm here about to apply the leather sealer, and what you can see there is it says matte on the side. They also had a satin finish. You know, for me, I would love to get that matte look. Now, I will say, as I have said before, the dye on here, at least in the black color, tends to dry pretty matte. I like this look, but I think this will hopefully help even it out, maybe hide some of the sins that I have made putting the dye down. But more than that, it's supposed to help prevent any transfer to clothes, especially the dark color to light clothes. And I wear a lot of my white leisure suits. I don't want any of that dye from the seats getting on here. So it says to shake well. I've been shaking this up very, very well. Have an applicator pad. It's in a little spray bottle here. So I'm just going to try to apply it like this. I'm going to start a long ways away from me. Kind of looks a little milky. I don't know that I have to go super heavy with this, but I want it in all of like the little nooks and crannies because there are a lot here the way the seat is pleated, and I think I just kind of rub it on, and I think the more you rub it, kind of the shinier it gets, so I don't need to really do much. I think just kind of get a coat on here, but you're seeing it real time. And then obviously what I will do is I will let that dry. And I don't know, I guess in the videos that I've watched, I've never seen him put on a second coat of this, but I don't know, since I've got it, maybe I will. Yeah, it's pretty easy to put on. Just feels like I'm cleaning the leather almost, but not hard. And just finish up the seat here, and I'll do the rest off camera, let it dry, and we will check it out. But I'll tell you, as of right now, it's a pretty easy application. And I'm definitely spraying it on the applicator. I don't want to spray it directly onto the seat, although I kind of feel like you could do that. It doesn't seem like it comes out super fast, and if you're wiping it, smoothing it around, probably not a problem for it to pool, but I think it's more just for that finish and to prevent the color transfer, I believe. So pretty simple. All right, this was the easiest step for sure so far. So that's the front seat. Done, I think. All right, on to the rest, and then we'll check it out when it's all dry. All right, it's been a couple days actually since I put that top coat on, and I want to show you something because up until this point, I have actually been super impressed with this process. And right here, you might say, oh, you know, looks like a matte finish, and I would say that that is true, but let me bust out the light here and show you what we have, and then I'll give you some of my thoughts on what I think is going on. So if I take this flashlight out here and shine on there, it looks like these seats are dusted and chalk. Now, I will say I didn't dab these seats. I just kind of wiped the top coat on there, and you can see how streaky that is. I mean, it almost looks like there's a light powder on there, but streaky. And I was like, oh no, that looks terrible. Now, a couple of things I will say. First of all, my first theory is that I did not apply this as well as I should have. I should have probably dabbed. I maybe should have gone a little thinner on the top coat. You can see it over there too. I mean, it's just looks like this everywhere. The other thing is, I would say that on a lighter color here, if this were a light tan, even a white, other light colors, this was probably not going to be that noticeable because the light color underneath is going to kind of obscure any streaking you might have. On a dark color, and this is the darkest dye they have, the ebony, not the ivory, I think this is where it's going to stand out most, and it does stand out. All right, so I thought about this a little bit, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I should try to touch this up. Maybe I should get the satin top coat and put a layer of that on there and try to kind of undo this so it doesn't look as dusty or grainy as it does right now. But what I thought I would do here first is actually use a leather cleaner and kind of clean the seats here, see if that knocks down this top coat a little bit, maybe kind of thins it out, some of these high spots, gets rid of some of the streakiness. If I take away this flashlight like this, it doesn't look that bad. But I would say in daylight, you're going to see that and it's going to look like it was wiped down with something. So I want to see what I can do here before I continue to go and maybe make it worse by putting additional layers of stuff on there. But like I said, I'm just going to use kind of a standard leather cleaner and just clean these up and see what it looks like after that. And then we'll go on to the next option. All right, so I'm going to clean this leather here. I don't want to use anything that's too aggressive. Some stuff is designed to kind of take off the top layer. I've had some nice experiences with this by Chemical Guys leather cleaner, so I'm just going to give it a good wipe down and see what we get after using this. All right, cleaning these seats. Just kind of giving them a wipe down with that leather cleaner. And I don't see much of a difference here. Under light, you can see that top coat right there. But in the garage lights, it doesn't look so bad. But, when it's going to be on sunlight or something, you're going to be able to see that. So this top coat is pretty durable and it is pretty persistent. But kind of my suggestion is, unless you really want it to be very, very matte finish, I might actually try to go with the satin finish. I think that's probably going to be better for most people. So I'll keep working on this, see how we end up. All right, after cleaning up the seats and retouching up the top coat again, didn't make any difference. And my learning here would be to go very, very easy, very, very light on the top coat. However, if we take a look at the seats under some bright light here, it doesn't look that bad. I don't see that streaking, a little bit, but not as bad as it was. And the reason here is because I had a little bit of dye left over and I thought, well, why don't I just try to dye over the bad top coat that I put on there? And so I did 2 light coats because I didn't want to keep layering on a lot of dye. I mean, eventually I'm going to have like an inch of dye on here, but kind of fix that. Might be hard to see because this light is so bright on there. I don't have that kind of dusty look, especially on the seat over there, so this doesn't look that bad. And especially under bright light, now it looks pretty good. So what I like about this is that the dye is really good, just by itself. It has maybe even the slightest satin sheen to it, but for the most part, it looks actually fairly matte. And what I also like is that, trying my darndest, I cannot get the dye to transfer. Even though this is black, and maybe if I had white clothes and I was jumping in this multiple times a day and bright hot sun or something like that, maybe I would see some transfer, but so far, I have not had any of that transfer onto anything that I have noticed. So I feel pretty good about this. I might take some satin top coat and try it on the headrest, just see how that is, maybe some testers in some places, and then maybe put a coat of that on there the next time I clean this up. But as of now, I don't want to screw it up, and it looks pretty good. In fact, in summary on this, I just cannot believe how these seats turned out. It is unbelievable. You may remember the side panel right there and the bolster right there. I mean, there were just deep, deep cracks. And while this doesn't look like I just reupholstered it or anything like that, man, this looks pretty good. And in fact, if you were to say, hey, these are 43-year-old seats, I mean, these are the original seat covers, you wouldn't believe it because you'd be like, man, this is in such good condition. But there's a lot of filler there. There's a lot of filler there and there and there. That seat wasn't as bad, but the rear seats had a bunch too. But this just looks incredible. In fact, the tear that was right there, that was the worst part. But man, That looks amazing, and I am totally stoked. I feel like I'm doing one of those late night infomercials where you are getting crazy results with some sort of miracle spread or something. It is really awesome. And in fact, when I was thinking about having these reupholstered or having a company do them professionally, I really thought that that was going to be my only option. And I'm super happy that I didn't do that, because this is actually pretty easy to do. It took me, yes, a few days to do for sure, but this now looks amazing. The cracks, the splits, the tears are all gone, and the seat looks beautiful. Just looks beautiful. And I didn't have to pull things out. I didn't have to find clips and hog rings and all of that stuff. So whether it's the interior of a car that you're working on like this, especially an old one. Here's the passenger seat. I don't think you're going to have damage as bad as this car. I mean, for many people, they've got a tear or where they scuffed it or something like that on a car that is much, much younger. And I think you can fix just about anything with this. So yeah, the materials are kind of expensive. I was all in at about $300 for the repair materials and the dye and that elastic filler to fix the tears in the leather. Right here, this panel here is heavy on that filler, and man, that looks great. I'll be honest, you can't even tell I did anything there, but that was all screwed up. So I definitely think this is a DIY because I did it. And so maybe you have a new car and just one tear and you're just trying to fix that, or a scratch or a scuff. I know that in many cars, the side bolster right here is what gets the wear, because you're kind of getting in and out of that car and compressing it and tearing it. And I've done that on my cars. In fact, the car over there has bolster wear. Now, heck, I might try to fix that at some point. But if you have something really bad, I definitely would not be too worried about it. And you can pick up most of these materials between Amazon.com and LeatherTouchUpDye.com. They really make some great products. I'm super happy with them. So if you have leather that you are trying to fix, save, repair, or just make look better, I will put a link to these products in the description.